How am I going to get all this done? Well, lucky for me, and now you, I've spent years trying to perfect these techniques that help me make studying a lot more efficient. I used to have those long 10-hour days at the library, studying, memorizing every concept, doing every single test paper, and still ending up with a B. But once I started to implement these techniques that I'm going to talk about today, I would spend just 5 hours studying the same subject and end up with an A. But how? What makes these techniques so incredibly efficient? Let's talk about that. The first step to efficient studying is, surprisingly enough, a mind map. Yes, a simple bubbles and arrows mind map. But here's the thing. With the slight twist that I'm going to talk about right now, it's going to become a game changer for your study sessions, your work sessions, or anytime you just want to learn and pick up new knowledge in a very efficient manner. Mind maps usually start with a central idea, and from there you branch out to relating concepts and creating a map of knowledge. Mind maps actually mirror the way that our brain naturally processes information, hence making it an amazing study technique to not only retain information, but also understand it in a more visual manner. Putting this into practice, let's say I'm studying for my computer architecture class, which is going to be the example I'm going to use for the rest of this video. Don't worry, you don't need to know anything about computer architecture. I don't think I remember much anyway. So typically when you sit down to study, what's the first thing you do? Open your notes, maybe read through it, maybe do some tests, right? I'm going to try to change that approach a bit. Instead of opening your notes, I'm going to ask you to first create a mind map, a basic brain dump of everything you think you know about the topic at hand. It doesn't have to be perfect at all. Just get all your thoughts out. Whether you're someone who has been to 20 lectures about this topic or who has been to none, I just want you to sit and dump what you think this topic is going to be about, or what do you know about this topic so far. So for computer architecture, I know that there's a CPU somewhere in there. There's also some registers, which I remember from some lectures. There is some use of assembly with the registers or something like that. I remember there's a control unit as well. Once I finish my brain dump is the next crucial step, which is to validate. I'm going to now go through each bubble that I've created, validate it by comparing it against my notes, textbooks, or even the internet. My main aim of doing this is to look for any gaps in my knowledge or any inaccuracies in what I've dumped down. By doing this, you're not only passively interacting with the material, but you are actively engaging in it. Again, improving our retention, making it a lot more efficient to study, and getting that knowledge that's on the notes into our heads in a much faster rate that's not only going to stay there for longer, but it's going to enter in faster, if it makes any sense. Over the course of hours, days, weeks, or even months, this lame mind map that you started off with is going to end up to become a comprehensive study guide that you can then use for revision, that's going to help again with your retention and your understanding of this whole subject or topic. Okay, so now I'm looking at my computer architecture mind map, and I have a lot of things on it. I have CPUs, internal memory, registers, and all that kind of stuff. But the question is, which ones should you dive into? Should I spend my time reading about registers? Or is it more important for me to understand memories? That's where our second technique comes into the picture, which is to focus on high impact topics. I'm sure you've heard of this before, the 80-20 rule, where 80% of your results come from 20% of the effort. This is true in so many areas of our life, whether it's playing sports, studying, at work, even sometimes cooking. That one spice can really make a difference. That's somewhat what this technique is going to be about. So the gist is to just focus on high impact topics, and those are the ones that you should dive deeper into. But how do you figure out what are the high impact topics that you should focus on? This is what I did for my university. First, open up your past year papers or your past tests and see what topics are recurring and what do the tests focus on. But not everyone is studying just for exams. Sometimes you're studying because you want to learn more about a topic. In those cases, that's where your first step, the mind maps, is going to come into the picture. No pun intended. What I like to do is look at my mind map and see where the heaviest branch is, which in my case, I would say is more or less the CPU branch. It's a lot more heavier than internal memory. So I think I'm going to start to focus on CPU. And inside CPU, there's a lot of stuff in registers. So maybe that's what I should read up on and look more into. This is one of those techniques that seems seemingly simple and something that you don't really think much about. But it's one of those things that, just like the 80-20 rule, it's going to play a big impact in your efficiency when it comes to studying at the end of the day. After you've identified what subtopics you should dive deeper into, the next challenge is you have a lot of information to read through. How do you do that? Tell me if this ever happened to you, because it definitely happened to me before. So often, I would start studying and the time would come when I have to open my notes. I would read through a same paragraph multiple times, again and again, but nothing would go in my head. And I'm like, why am I so distracted and unfocused? I'm sitting here reading this, not looking at my phone, but why can't I remember anything? If that has happened to you before, this technique is going to help you like it helped me. It's called note-taking and elaboration. There's two key parts to it. The first part is when you open up a paragraph of notes or maybe a lecture slide. What I used to do was summarize what I understand in that slide in my own words. And I emphasize doing it in your own words. It's very easy to naturally copy whatever is written in the lecture notes or in any piece of information that you are reading. But when you have to write it in your own words, that's when you actually start to think a lot more about it. And it helps me personally with being able to remember this piece of information in the future. When I say summary, I don't mean like a few lines. I used to just write a few words, sometimes even draw diagrams, because like I said, I'm a very visual thinker and a visual learner. So for me, just drawing maps, sub-maps in that lecture slide is actually very helpful for me to comprehend that piece of information. The second part of elaboration is to connect this new information in this lecture slide to something that you already know. If I've just read about how a CPU processes instructions, I might relate to it in something familiar, like the steps involved in following a recipe. This comparison not only reinforces the concept, but it also makes it a lot more memorable, because now every time I think of CPU instructions, I'm going to think of lasagna recipe or the other way around, which would be very interesting. So I don't really know the exact science behind it. I don't know why it works, but it does. Step number 4, start testing early. How early? As soon as possible. Now, if let's say I have 5 hours to study for a subject, doesn't seem like a lot to some, maybe to others it might seem like a lot, but how I would split these 5 hours is as such. The first hour, I would start by creating a mind map and identify high-impact topics. Hour 2, dive into a practice test or have someone quiz me on the material. My goal right here is to gauge my understanding of the topic at hand. Am I very, very lost? Or do I actually know a lot? Because what I've realized when I test is that I might think that, I don't know much about this topic. But I'll open the test and sometimes everything would just suddenly come back to me as I'm put in a position where I have to know what the answer is. Hour 3, I would actually go back to my notes, update my mind map, and focus on the topics I struggled with during the test. Hour 4, I would actually take another practice test to just see how much I've improved and if there are any gaps in my knowledge. And hour 5, I would do a final review. Just look through my tests that I've taken so far, look at my notes, see my mind map, and make sure everything is as clear as possible in this short period of time. If you look at this and you think that this timeline seems very unrealistic, you are not wrong. I mean, I don't even have time for a break or for food, nothing. So this is definitely not an average student's timeline. But the key idea is this: integrate testing into your study sessions instead of leaving it at the end like I used to in the past. This is why it works. With this technique, you're going to easily able to identify what are your knowledge gaps and then work on them in that moment instead of waiting for you to take that exam and then you work on your knowledge gaps. And second, it primes our brains to understand what information I don't really know. And then when I revisit it in the next few steps, I will then remember it much better. So that's all for now. I do have some other techniques as well, but this video was starting to get very long, and so I decided to leave some of them out. But let me know if you like this one, and happy to make another one. I do want to caveat and say that the goal of this video is not to help you get an A, although I know I focused it a lot around studying, But these techniques can be very easily used in the rest of your life, for the rest of your life, because it's all about maximizing our understanding of a certain topic with the limited time that we have. By honing these skills, I hope that you will learn more efficiently, whether you're a student or whether you're out in the working world, because it's something that will benefit all of us. It still does to me. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.